Well, I hope you are still alive, and but we are. It's very simple. In the program, I've got half an hour to speak. We are half an hour late, so the equation is very easy to solve. You don't have to get a degree in mathematics for that, and we could go immediately to the closing by the president of the academy. It would make him have to come back to the stage immediately. So. Well, I'll try to be as brief as possible, and that's not simple, because I was asked first to speak about the old subject and, in fact, your work during that I've tried to catalyze during 1 year. And I was also asked to take some conclusions out of this conference. And to do it in 5 minutes is not very easy, but I'll do my best if you agree. First, I'm going to test this to see how fast this goes. Yes, it goes very fast. Okay, let's start and let's be as brief as possible. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you and to praise your initiative. That I think is the most important slide of my presentation. To praise the initiative. It is, you probably don't know, but it is the initiatives by the organized scientific community, like the Academy or other academies, other scientific societies, are normally invisible in Europe, and they are very scarce. You have got very few initiatives that go beyond their immediate objectives. Of course, you have initiatives for research spending, you have initiatives concerning laws or organization of universities, but societal questions raised by professional scientists need, of course, to be successful, to bring in many other members of society, are not very common in any European country. I've been following this for several decades, and I can tell you that the number of initiatives, the organized initiatives, individual initiatives are plenty, but organized initiatives by groups are not very common. And so I was proud to help because of that. Because you were enthusiastic, because you were committed to a difficult task that you were not sure you could succeed. And no one can be sure to succeed, because it will require an enormous involvement, not only of those related to the science-based professions and the economy, but also to the rest of society. Okay. I've tried to organize my mind, and so I'll try to go quickly to this organization. First of all, it has been recalled during this conference, and I've just checked with Luc Certain that the coining of the word economy, knowledge economy, was Dominique Fauré in '94, and in fact that was immediately injected into the political machinery of OECD in '95, knowledge-based economies, and that was at the same time the era of the development, deployment of information technology. So information society came first, because that was the translation of, the American translation of what at that time in Europe was still highways of information, broadband, in fact, how we say now. But at the same time, the science system got from the economic input, got an economic input that was in need of. There was the first time I remember in the 90s where organized groups of economists and the OECD amplified the idea that indeed the science system was an essential part of the economy and of the progress of the economy. You recall that at the beginning of the 90s and of the 80s, John Simon had wrote Science as a Steady State. In fact, the increase since the Second World War of the public budgets of sciences and the enormous accumulation of human capital and physical capital for science in the United States has started to produce an enormous revolution in the private sector, namely in the United States and later in Europe. And that message of recognition from the economy at the highest level had an enormous impact in policy making at the time. In the year 2000, there were a major political breakthrough, not surprisingly, because in fact it was the continuation of this discussion over the 90s and the amplification of information technologies and the need in Europe to resist or respond to the visible investment in IT in the United States. You must recall that when in the year 2000 there were enormous debates in many European countries and with telecommunication companies to see if the internet was something that should be left to the market or the governments should do something, namely in schools, the opinion were divided. And in fact, many people said, well, it will be like the phone lines. You don't care about it. You shouldn't do it. And in fact, more than 10 years earlier, the National Science Foundation had dedicated money from the research budget of the United States to pay for the connection of schools all over the United States to the internet. Okay, the major breakthrough was the Council in the year 2000. This idea that Europe should become the most competitive and dynamic knowledge-based economy in the world, capable of sustainable economic growth. I'm just quoting the words that were there. With more and better jobs and greater social cohesion. That was 14 years ago, in the year 2000. And in fact, for the first time, you see that's preparing the transition to a knowledge-based economy and society by better policies for the information society. You will recall that at the time in the year 2000, Luc Sutte was one of the distinguished economists who were an essential part of the preparation of this unanimous decision by policy leaders. At the time, the discussion was between France and the United Kingdom. On one hand, the social model, European social model. On the other hand, the investment in innovation and IT. And in fact, the combination of this conflict, in fact, was positively resolved by the idea that investing in education and research and expanding the idea of investing in IT into investing in something that was more profound than technology, that was really, people were going to profit from a different education that IT would help to provide, would be there. Well, this is the political status. Philippe Pusquin was not there, but I remember the role of Philippe Pusquin was newly elected commissioner for the European Commission at the time. And okay, that's for the history. Now, for the record, I would just like, and I will skip the slides, a word of recognition why I come here now, trying to address you with this. And I must thank Professor Irina and the steering committee for that. I had, if we had the time, I would make you laugh with the exchange of emails starting in April 2013 and finishing with an act of folly when I said yes. But I said yes, changing the idea of thinker into the idea of a catalytical role and of catalysis. And I won't bother you with Berzelius and what catalysis means in ancient Greek. One of the meanings, normally it means destroy, etc., etc. One of the meanings is stay one night. It's just for one night. It's in Themistocles. So it is a very interesting and curious idea. So the Academy accepted swiftly the idea that I should come just for one night. Okay, I would like to show you, because at this time of the day I must also entertain you, with in 2004, Georges Charpak wrote a book. Georges Charpak was the Nobel Prize winner in physics. We worked together at CERN when he was developing his chambers, wire chambers for, in fact, were the beginning of the new imagology with particles and PET, etc., in hospitals. And then he developed the La Main à la Patte, this movement for science education in primary schools in France. In fact, he was inspired by Leo Lederman in the United States, another physicist, Nobel Prize winner in physics. And in 1995, when he wrote this book, he sent me dedication saying, well, ils sont fous à Bruxelles. And the last word is, ils mettent la charrue avant les bœufs. That was about what we are discussing here. He was not speaking about physics, I can tell you. He was speaking about science education and the promotion of science education. Okay, there is another point of view that I will try not to avoid. And this is and I will try not to avoid, because either it seems too philosophical and too theoretical, it comes back to us now. It's the question of the fundamentals of knowledge and of technology. Some of you are probably aware of the revival these days, I mean last weeks, intellectually in many parts of the world, of the discussion about the famous essay by Heidegger in 1949. Well, you remember one of the intellectual founders of Europe, Denis de Rougemont, who said and wrote in 1981, "Information n'est pas savoir," information is not knowledge. And that remained as a flag for the information technologies, and this paper was extremely influential in the idea that one should go beyond the simple idea of information. Today we listen to Svein Schubert saying, well, a technique for testing education system doesn't necessarily contribute to improve education. In 1939, just before the Second World War, one of the most interesting papers appeared. No one realized at the moment, and that was Ortega y Gasset on Méditation de la Técnica. But in fact, in 1949, the war ended in 1945. In 1949, Heidegger, in the Bremen lecture, said, "Farming is now a motorized food industry, in essence the same as the fabrication of corpses in gas chambers and extermination camps, the same as the blockade and starving of the peasantry, the same as the fabrication of the hydrogen bomb." This has been discovered and discussed in the 50s, and then people, as usually, forgot all about it. And it is now, it's back. This quotation is from the issue to come in next week in New York Review of Books, December 4. And there is a lot of discussion now about it. It has deeply to do with the idea that society is becoming technical, and so all things that are technical are more or less the same and inspired by the same principles. And many people, in fact, have that as a gospel. And that should be attacked from the very start if you are discussing knowledge-based societies and knowledge-based economies. This is a ghost that is hanging on our heads all the time. And it's coming back. Don't think that it's something in 49. It's coming back over and over again. Okay, this intellectual debate exists. I'm sorry to be so brief about it. But there is also a vast international and European accumulated expertise on the question you have asked yourselves, how to mobilize society in order to convince families, young people, to study sciences. Because it's, of course, it's hard work. Of course it's hard work. Well, right, it's, for those who like it, it's fun. It can be fun. But it's hard work. Hard work can be fun, fine. But it can also be very depressing. And it's hard and it's work. It's nothing to do. You can't learn anything decently, either science or arts or philosophy, without hard work. And to send a different message to education is really cheating the young people. Okay, there is a vast international European accumulated expertise, namely during the last 20 years, and related to this evolution, this political evolution. Many of these books, and Svein Sjöberg has been part of many of them, have been either published by, I've just chosen those who are European, and all of them are here. Well, this question has been asked over and over again for the last 20 years in many countries and at European level. We are revisiting something that has been intensively studied. Thousands of pages have been written, recommendations have been transformed into law in many countries, into investment programs, in changing in training teachers, in structures that are available in many, many countries. What here we have discussed during the year is we have developed an acronym, F2KS, the future of Flanders as a knowledge society. I will use this acronym as the name of a program, as if it was an object. So I'll say F2KS is first of all a decoder of new signs of societal threats and opportunities. And that is, I'm now coming to the heart of the subject, what I have learned with you these last months. So F2KS is, greetings to Maastricht. Don't forget us. Is about developing a process, because if you want to change, you need a process, because you need to involve people and to recognize factors. As those who are experts in forward-looking studies know, normally a forward-looking study is deployed by identifying the shaper factors and the shaping actors for the future. So without the social actors, the people, the organizations, etc., and without the factors which condition their action, you cannot move forward. Okay, what I have recognized, and that's of course, it's the end of the day, you can't throw anything to me at this time of the day, is signs of anxiety, signs of change, and signs of perplexity. The signs of anxiety are the perception of lack of motivation by many for studying science, the anticipation of a future deficit of science teachers, and the perception of a lack of certain technical professions. These three signs of anxiety, not 30, 3 major. But there are signs of change, and I put all of them with an interrogation mark, because it's up to you to know if that change is real or it's just wording. Is apparently a tendency to trying to address social mechanisms, some would call anachronisms, rooted in the school system, and rethinking the question of social selectivity in education. I have seen all statistics in education, but I haven't seen no statistics pointing out what has been obvious in many other European countries. Is the school system contributing to social mobility or not contributing to social mobility? And that's the question that is all over the places as a key political element in many European countries. Second, trying to address students' orientation and information systems. And to address this is to give orientations, political orientations, to the orientation and information systems. They are not technical, they are political. And second and third, being aware of the need to change and looking for signs of disruption. Is the system going to remain as it is, or will it be disrupted? It will be disrupted because of Islamic students in some communities where migrants are important, or will be disrupted just because students will not go into the professions that are needed. And signs of perplexity. Those are my signs of perplexity. Is how to face the impossibility, because it's impossible, to both reproducing social rigidity and segregation in society, and at the same time help infusing new innovative energies in youth. Because that's what all the messages coming from the youth is give us reasons for have innovative energies. How to increase and assert the right of political self-determination, and that's a key point in a region like Flanders, but also in other regions and nations in Europe, and Flanders is historically a nation, increasingly assert this right, and at the same time to move towards a more diverse and open society, because this is a challenge to do this and not go into isolation. And last, how to invest creatively and generally in transforming exclusion into opportunities. You don't have the number of, the percentage of women in well-educated women in full-time jobs in science and technology-based professions is very low in society, and that's an enormous threat. And there will be, there are dropouts of education, which get no diploma, and there is a problem that you share with other many rich societies in Europe, is the problem of the immigrants and the first and second generation of immigrants in school. Will they be considered a problem or an opportunity, and is society prepared to invest the money and resources needed to transform this problem into an opportunity? F2KS should be a platform for concerted action on these, to solve these problems. But for that you need to identify the dimensions of these actions. I've tried to identify these dimensions. These dimensions, if I look at them politically, they could be programs with leadership, with budgets, etc., and they are overlapping. And they must be overlapping so that there will be competition among the political and social actors. First is the question of promoting scientific and technical culture in society. So bringing people more knowledge about science and technology. Then is the education for everyone, and the role of science and technology learning at that stage. And many of the discussions we had today with science teachers were on this specific problem. Then is the problems of lifelong learning, we have not addressed here today, the problems of vocational training, and of addressing social and economic perceived qualification gaps. These three areas need specific programs to be addressed. They cannot be addressed by wording. In the United Kingdom, the question of the economic perceived qualification gap has been and is being addressed by UK business in collaboration with local education authorities. In many other countries, there are other solutions, either by branch or regionally, but all have something in common. They are systematic. They produce a kind of observatory, and this observatory involve the local education authorities or councils involving, in some countries, it's councils with municipalities, parents, etc., schools, on one hand, and employers on the other hand. And they do it systematically and locally. Then there is a problem of science communication and the media. And I'm sorry, I have never seen this problem being addressed without a strong public policy on this area. Because the number of science communicators, namely professional science journalists, can be greatly improved by government, simply. News agencies, desks for science can be asked for by the authorities. The promotion of training of journalists out of the scientific professions is something that has been around in Europe for many, many years. And in fact, it attracts youth with a high level of scientific training in every country. And it helps to change the profession of journalists and to create desks, professional desks of science and technology journalists in journals. As in the economy, we know very well, the journalists covering the economy have got, many of them, this type of training. So it could be extended to other areas. And finally, the general political problem that any political party and any government must ask itself is, will my voters support me? For that, I need to strengthen and to bring together the constituencies for science and technologies. I mean, those people in society, and those groups in society that for different reasons, and unconnected and disconnected one from the other, would be in favor of a priority to different areas of science and technology. Bringing them together is something you cannot ask the people to do by themselves, and you cannot ask the second law of thermodynamics to do it for you. It requires external energy. It requires an applied field. And that applied field in democratic societies is provided by government. At national, regional, sub-regional level, it is one of the reasons why we elect authorities in a democratic society, is to bring in constituencies to promote causes in society and promote change in society. If F2KS would be and the Academy could think about projecting an independent proposal for coherent political objectives, and that's the role of an organized independent group of scientists, is to address the authorities and to say what they think and what they propose. It's not to produce the technicalities of the action for them. It's to produce the ideas that will then have to be negotiated and translated into action by those who are in charge. I've done the following exercise, and again, this is the second moment of my speech where I would need something to protect me for things you are going to send to me, but I'm protected by the hour. I've tried to write and to test a kind of political decalogue for the future of knowledge in society in Flanders. I've tested it some weeks ago in the Scientics conference in Brussels, and I'm grateful for those who were there. And in fact, I then have checked with some of you some of the ideas there and written. So that's probably because the Auberge du Cygne is in Brussels. I wouldn't dare to do it if I was not here. Well, first, 10 points. 10 points that, in my view, should be discussed by you because they could be part of a political program in this specific area to all political parties and to any government. First, the main purpose of science and technology education general, I mean in obligatory education for everyone, the main purpose is the scientific and technological culture of society in large. It's not obvious. And there is a choice. If you do that, the training of teachers, the programs, the materials, etc., have to be conditioned by this objective. But this is the political objective. Second, science education is not only part of the responsibility of a ministry in charge of education. Is part of any ministry in charge of research, of science and technology. Science and technology policy must devote a budget, organization, means, and pay the political price, if there is a failure, for science education. They will say, well, we have got X% of new papers in Nature, Cell, etc., how many innovations and patents, and what is your record in science education? It's part of the job of a minister in charge of research. Third, you require investing in science and technology. Education, formal and informal. Informal means science centers and means the media. You must invest in the media for that, and in schools at all levels, and of course the usual suspects. You must invest in research, and you must invest in innovation policies. This is a difficult point, and this point has been with us for many years. The fact that, contrary to the expectations of those who live within the science sector, the youth are not keen, and some of the best youth and the most creative youth are not keen on science and technology, is a disease of rich societies. And it's a disease of non-challenging ideas about science, and the fact that science is not connected to human values. And only the human values of science can motivate and permeate youth culture. You will not permeate youth culture in a rich society. We are not in rural China, where studying day and night mathematics is the only way out of poverty. No. We are in a rich society, and in general, for a vast number of families, if you try to choose something easier, well, life will not be bad at all, after all. So that's not the point, is how science can permeate youth culture and be appropriated by youth culture. It's not by telling the youth, sorry, that's very important to make a lot of money in companies. That, very frankly, will not change the mind of anyone 14 or 15. It's much more if you say that you are looking for extraterrestrial life. Thank you, Connie, about that. Yes. And in fact, to say roughly and rudely what science is about. It's about pursuing the truth. It's about requiring proof, not authority. It's about knowledge, not ignorance. It's about technical training, not definitions. We haven't learned anything if in school we are told definitions. We just learn the name, but that's not science, sorry. And it's history. It's where it comes from, not sound bites. On the other hand, we must teach our students that science does not allow for neutrality. You may have in your life, if you go into a science profession or science-based profession, to choose. You choose peace or war. Many of my colleagues have worked in developing very nasty bombs. You remember when the Jason Committee was exposed in the United States, there were extraordinary science. Some of my colleagues who developed bombs where the remain of the bomb inside the body could not be detected by X-ray. Sorry, you must say, if you go into science, you must know if you are in favor of that, and some are in favor of that, or against it. It's a battleground science. Science is not neutral. And if you know it's not neutral, it becomes interesting. It can become part of the modern youth culture. You must choose between generosity or greed, and you must choose between disclosing or hiding the truth. I agree with Connie very much that basic sciences are key. And basic sciences like astronomy, like genetics, many basic sciences are absolutely key. And astronomy, I am a particle physicist myself. Basic sciences are a key element to attract the imagination both of society and of the students. And of course, the basics of the importance of science in society must be spelled out. You can't have quality control. The water you drink, the air you breathe, are all related to science. Science provides society with evaluation and quality control, in fact, with the culture of evaluation and quality control, with risk governance. You would be submerged by epidemics without science every day, and with the tools for social communication and social cohesion, because public policies, if they are not tested by independent scientific methods, they will be rotten, as we all know. Okay, I'll go quickly now because I am in the fifth commandment. So I'll just you read and go quickly to the others. But my point on point 6 is please do not split and create a barrier between what you call STEM and all the rest. Because you are not doing a service to the science teachers, not to the students. And I've told you some hours ago, some of the best science collective projects and teamwork projects in this area all over the world have been obtained by the combination and the involvement of teachers of different areas and researchers of different areas. It includes language, it includes geography, it includes history, etc. It can be led by science and by technology, but must involve the school. If it does not involve the school, it's a failure. It means that the culture of the school has not been permeated by this drive for science and technology. This is a difficult point, and it's a threat for many European countries. We have seen that, and we are seeing that in Germany, in France, in the UK, and many other countries. Is that the world has changed a lot and is changing every day. Poverty and war are at the frontiers of Europe. 10 years ago, the number of people crossing by boat by night the Mediterranean was less than 1/10 of those who are crossing today. And this number is increased and will increase because of war and because of refugees. So the refusal of addressing poverty and war at the frontiers of Europe, of addressing, I'm not saying accepting or not accepting, of addressing this problem and addressing the increasing inflow of refugees and illegal immigrants as an opportunity, because you will have them anyhow, are major threats for the development of highly advanced European society. Because with declining birth rates in Europe, and with many people coming in anyhow, something has to be done. And Europe does not exist politically. Some countries, some regions will do much better than others. And the future of their economy and their social peace will be the price to pay at the end of the day. This question of the perceived lack of science and technology-based professionals in the economy and society, I think it must be taken seriously. It has been said loudly by many, many people, mainly from companies. Of course they know their field. They can't speak about society in general. They can speak about their company. But it must be taken seriously by the whole scientific community. First, for a political reason. Because if there is a group that is part of the constituency for science, and this group perceives a problem, then this problem must become a problem of all of us. Because that's the only way to build a social constituency for science. It is if Solvay has a problem. The question of science teachers have been predicted many years ago. There is a demonstration by John Zyment, who died some years ago, about that. He said, it's a sad fact that in most countries, very few students who have specialized in science and technology or mathematics are recruited into teacher profession, education. Paradoxically, the more a society has a need for people with science and technology background, the less likely it is that such people will enter the teaching profession. Why? Part of the reason is that remuneration, working conditions, possibilities for in-service training, etc., make the teaching profession less attractive than other areas of work for people who are in demand, of course, in those areas. Well-qualified and motivated science and technology teachers are key when it comes to stimulating future generations interested in science. Well, you see the lesson, the political lesson. Of course, it's difficult, but it is not, if it is not solved, well, the problem will not be solved. If symbolic and material remuneration, if working conditions, if possibilities for in-service training are not improved, the situation will be degraded. There is nothing new under the sun about it. And it has happened in other countries. So it will happen in this one if nothing is done. And it has been predicted many years ago. It is not a novelty. And we know the solution, and many countries have solved this problem. This, I come to one of the, almost my last point, is that the empowerment of science teachers and their social recognition, but the empowerment of such teachers in school is a key for success, in my view, of sustainable science and technology policies. And it has been discussed elsewhere that the machinery that exists for research, funding research project work, can be extended easily from the research budget, in addition to the education budget, to project work by science teachers themselves, teams of teachers and teams of students. But there is just one caveat about it. It must be additional You can't just move money from one place for the other. And the dimension must be big enough. The temptation is to transform all that into an experiment, into education, into innovation. Well, I'm sorry. If you do that, you will not reach the scale to reach society, to bring this to the attention of parents and kids. I've made the calculation based upon my own experience and your population in school, and I would say, well, if your minister would ask me, I would say, well, annual calls for proposals should aim at reaching in less than 3 years' time at least 50% of all schools, 1,000 F2KS science teachers. I would call them F2KS science teachers. Those who were engaged in these projects, and at least 100 researchers. And that is a very, very modest number, and I hope that the generosity of researchers in giving free time for the schools in their neighborhood as part of their social responsibility would increase very much this number. But numbers lower than this will not have an impact in society. Okay, I now go, I will skip my, and I go to the end. The end, it must be peaceful and must come from history. And that's my final message from history. And it has to do with our common background. Portugal and Flanders have been very close together during the 16th century. And both during the 16th century have been doomed by intolerance. In fact, the most rich families who first settled in Antwerp and then in Leuven and were a source of wealth, but also a source of humanist culture, a source of the revival of the humanism during the 16th centuries, in fact, then escaped to Amsterdam. And the rise of religious intolerance in Europe, the rise of the Inquisition, the rise of the wars of religion, in fact, transformed one of the most rich regions, two of the most rich regions in Europe, into normal or dependent regions afterwards. So the rise and fall of tolerance, humanism, and prosperity in Flanders and Portugal in the 16th centuries should be a lesson for us. And it is a lesson that I try to remember. Because we are now in a stage where the rise of Europe as a knowledge society, and there is no doubt about it, during the last 20 years, not only Flanders, but the whole European Union had experienced an extraordinary progress for the knowledge society. The number of students, the number of educated researchers, the investment, public and private, in research, the results of research, the appropriation of research in products and services in society has been tremendous in the European Union over the last 20 years. And that has been appropriated also by almost all political parties and all governments. At least they all either do something or pay lip service to the idea that they are in favor and they do what they can for knowledge society. That I call the rise of Europe as a knowledge society. But now we face an uncertain future. War has surrounded Europe, and poverty trying to come into Europe has surrounded Europe during the last 10 years. Division has doomed the hopes of the years 2000 within Europe. And any of us in each own society, we must do our best to overcome this difficult situation. As in a conference almost 1 year ago here, I recalled a famous humanist, Portuguese by birth, married to a Flanders family, in a Flanders family, who fought for the defense of Leuven against the French troops. In fact, was arrested and was in fact ransomed by the King of Portugal. A friend of Erasmus, and at the end of his life, after being back in Portugal as the royal historian, he was imprisoned by the Inquisition, condemned to perpetual prison, then freed, and probably assassinated.